The movie begins by showing three people traveling around the world. The three people are Chris, Natalie, and Amanda. They have traveled to many places, such as Paris, Rome, and London. This time, they went to a city called Kiev, which is the capital of Ukraine. Chris's brother was waiting there, and they wanted to take him to Moscow. This is Paul, Chris's older brother, who is still single. Chris told him that he would propose to Natalie in Moscow. The next morning, while Chris, Natalie, and Amanda are having breakfast, Paul arrives. He invites them to travel to an extreme place. He got the offer from someone who runs an extreme tourism business. The extreme place in question is the city of Pripyat, which is located not far from Chernobyl, which is a former nuclear disaster city. They knew that the radiation there was still high, but Paul said they wouldn't be there long, only 2 hours, and then they would go home. Amanda, who is a photographer, was interested in it because she could get rare, interesting, and natural photos that she could get from there. So did Natalie, who was interested in that. Unlike Chris, who wanted to continue the trip to Moscow, which was their next destination. But since most of them agreed, Chris was forced to join the extreme tour. Finally, they arrived at the person's place. Introducing, this is Yuri, the person who will help them later. In fact, Yuri is a former soldier. We can see from his photo that he displays. Shortly after that, suddenly there were people who also joined the tour. These two people are named Michael and Zoe. They are a couple who just met a month ago. After that, they immediately left there in a van owned by Yuri. To make a long story short, they arrived at the border of the city of Pripyat. There, some soldiers were already guarding the border. Chris's suspicions were aroused. Why a place that has been abandoned for years is guarded by soldiers? Maybe it's because the radiation there is still high, so it's guarded so that no one can enter carelessly. Yuri went down to negotiate for them to be given permission to enter. But unfortunately, they were not given permission at all. There was some kind of repair going on there. Feeling that he had been paid and not wanting to disappoint them, Yuri chose another way in. Along the way, Chris saw the high radiation warning signs posted along the road. Long story short, they arrived at another checkpoint that had no guards or iron fences. Then they stopped by the river because Yuri wanted to show something in it. As Yuri was stirring his hands in the water, he suddenly found a fish with a very strange shape. Apparently, this fish had mutated due to nuclear radiation. Then they went straight back into the van. Without their knowledge, there was a shadow swimming in the river. They arrived in the center of Pripyat. There were many flats where Chernobyl workers and their families lived. Just in case, Yuri brought a radiation level checker, and the radiation in that place was still safe. Then they approached a Ferris wheel. Yuri said the Ferris wheel was used for a festival, but the festival never happened. They visited several other places, such as a sports hall, a bowling alley, and other abandoned places. As they were about to enter a flat, they were surprised by the decomposing carcass of a dog. Yuri also told them that the residents didn't pack up their belongings in the past, which left the flats contaminated with radiation. And that made the looters who took all the belongings in this flat sickly. Then they found a photo spot with a beautiful view. There, Yuri found burn marks that seemed to be new and tried to hide them. At the same time, Yuri hears a noise from a room and tries to check it out himself. It turned out to be a bear. Luckily, no one was hurt. After the incident, they went straight back to the van to head home. When Yuri started the van, the engine wouldn't start. Apparently, the starter cable had been tampered with, bitten by something. Then Yuri tried to call for help using his walkie-talkie, but no one responded. Until nightfall, he kept trying to call for help. But no one responded to Yuri's call, as it was probably out of signal range. There was an argument between Paul and Chris. Chris blamed Paul for bringing him to this strange place. Michael suggested walking to the nearest checkpoint, but Yuri rejected this suggestion as it was too dangerous to walk in pitch darkness. Their only option was to stay in the van until morning. Suddenly there was a sound like a baby crying outside. Then Yuri checks the situation outside with a gun in his hand. Chris also goes out and catches up with Yuri, even though Paul told him to stay in the van. Suddenly there was a gunshot. Chris and Yuri are attacked by a pack of wild dogs. Chris suffers bite wounds, and Yuri is dragged somewhere by the dogs. At the same time, the dogs returned and attacked their van, which startled them and made them panic. Then the lights in the van went out, as the van's battery started to run out. Long story short, morning came. Chris's wounds were getting worse, and he had to be taken to the hospital immediately. Paul tried to contact Yuri with the other walkie-talkie, but there was no response at all. He decided to go looking for him, accompanied by Amanda and Michael. Then, they found Yuri's walkie-talkie in front of the entrance of a building and tried to go inside to find his whereabouts. Slowly, they walked through the dark hallways inside the building. In a room, they finally found Yuri, but in a terrible condition. His body had been torn to shreds, and the contents of his stomach were all out. As they were looking for his gun, someone suddenly walked in. The person was seen shuffling Yuri's corpse. Amanda, who was still there, was trying to take Yuri's gun. Eventually, they escaped and returned to the van. Since Chris can't walk, they plan to seek help at a nearby checkpoint and return before it gets dark. Here, Amanda checks her shots. Apparently, there was an apparition inside the building. Paul left his walkie-talkie and gun to Natalie just in case, and left immediately. On the way, they encountered a pack of dogs in front of them and had to find a detour. But unfortunately, the radiation there was getting worse. Then they found a parking lot where there were many cars. They looked for a starter cable that could still be used to restart the van. There, they found a school bus filled with bullet holes. Surprisingly, the holes came from bullets fired out of the bus. Paul and Amanda check inside the bus and find a broken AK-47 rifle and a working flashlight, which they believe belongs to the soldier guarding the place. But who was the soldier shooting at? Luckily, Michael finds a starter cable in a van that still works. Suddenly, a pack of wild dogs came and chased them. They immediately run with all their might until they cross a bridge to avoid the dogs. Unexpectedly, Zoe took a wrong step and fell down. As a good boyfriend, Michael immediately jumped in to save her. However, Michael was suddenly surrounded by something inside. Turns out it was the fish we saw in the beginning. Fortunately, Michael only suffered a minor injury to his leg, and they left immediately. Night fell. When they arrived, the van was wrecked, and there was no Chris or Natalie in it. Then they find Natalie's cell phone inside. The tape contained footage of Chris proposing to Natalie, but suddenly Chris was dragged away by something. After seeing that, they immediately searched for the whereabouts of the two of them. Then they entered a building. When they entered a room, they saw a creature. While running, they found Natalie in a state of severe shock because Chris had been captured by those creatures. Then they left from there. They went by the route on the map, but unfortunately got lost. In the midst of the confusion, there was a little boy standing right behind them. When they were approached, Natalie was caught again, and they immediately chased her. Seen, the little boy suddenly disappeared somewhere. Then they arrived at a place, and there were already many people surrounding them. They ran to a place where there was an underground bunker. Unfortunately, Michael was caught, which made Zoe very sad. But they had to keep moving, looking for a safe place. The deeper they go into the bunker, the more horrifying things they encounter. There, Paul found Chris's proposal ring for Natalie. Then they were again surprised by one creature who was there. They again tried to escape. Unfortunately, Zoe was also caught by the creatures, leaving Amanda and Paul alone. As it turns out, the bunker is connected to a secret facility. At that very moment, they feel their whole body and face on fire. When checked, it turns out that the radiation level in that place is already very dangerous. As they continued their journey, they found the dead Natalie lying on the ground. As they were walking, they were suddenly surrounded and attacked by those people. But fortunately, they managed to escape. In a weakened state, finally, they were found by a group of soldiers and asked them for help. But the soldiers shot Paul instead. In the end, only Amanda survived, and then the soldiers captured Amanda. Amanda woke up and heard the doctor's explanation saying the people who had attacked them were victims of nuclear radiation who had escaped from the isolation room. Initially, they said that Amanda would be given help, but instead, she was put into a room where there were many of these strange creatures that then attacked her. The movie ends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, because by subscribing you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.